I never thought I'd have to evict a squatter from my own land, especially not one who claimed the laws of reality didn't apply to him. But this sovereign citizen stole my lakefront property, and what he didn't know was that I play the long game. It all started a few years back. I inherited a beautiful, untouched piece of land from my grandfather. It wasn't huge, but it had this gorgeous, private lake, nestled away from everything. It was my sanctuary, my future retirement spot. For years, it sat there peacefully. I'd visit a couple of times a year, just to walk the trails and make sure everything was okay. Then, one spring, I drove up and found the shock of my life. A brand new, albeit shoddily built, cabin was sitting right by the shore. And there was a man, let's call him Captain Delusion, fishing off a makeshift dock like he owned the place. I pulled up, my heart pounding, and got out of my car. I tried to be calm. "Excuse me," I said. "I think you're on my property." He barely looked at me. He just reeled in his line and said, with this smug grin, "This isn't your property, friend. This is sovereign land, free from the tyranny of your corporate government." I was stunned. He then launched into this bizarre monologue about maritime law, gold-fringed flags, and how he was a freeman on the land. He told me my deed was just a piece of paper, and that he had claimed this land by improving it. Improving it? He'd cut down a dozen old-growth trees and slapped together a plywood shack. I tried to reason with him. I showed him the property records on my phone, the deed with my name on it, the survey maps. He just laughed. He said those were fictional documents created by an illegitimate entity. He warned me that if I tried to remove him, I'd be violating his natural rights, and he'd sue me for millions in his own common law court. This guy was a true believer. He wasn't just trespassing. In his mind, he was a homesteader, and I was the intruder. I knew right then that a simple conversation wasn't going to solve this. Calling the local sheriff seemed like the obvious next step, but that's where the real nightmare began. So, I called the sheriff. An older, weary-looking deputy came out. I explained the whole situation, showed him my paperwork, and pointed at the illegal cabin. The deputy sighed. He knew this guy. Apparently, Captain Delusion had been a thorn in the county's side for years, filing mountains of nonsense paperwork and clogging up the courts with frivolous lawsuits. The deputy explained that because the squatter had established a residence, even an illegal one, it was now a civil matter. They couldn't just drag him off. I'd have to go through the eviction process. "You're kidding me," I said. "I have to evict someone from a house he illegally built on my land?" The deputy just shrugged. "That's the law, son. Good luck." And so began the descent into legal madness. I hired a lawyer, and we filed the official eviction paperwork. The first notice was served. Captain Delusion's response was to mail me a 200-page manifesto, bound in a plastic folder, detailing why the court had no jurisdiction over him. He also sent me an invoice for $10 million for trespassing on his sovereign embassy and causing emotional distress. The court date was set. Of course, he didn't show up. The judge granted a default judgment in my favor. I thought, great, this is it. It's over. I was so naive. We got the writ of possession, the legal document that allows the sheriff to physically remove him. We scheduled the day. I went out there with 2 deputies. Captain Delusion was waiting on his porch. When the deputies told him he had to leave, he pulled out his phone and started live streaming, yelling about tyranny and how armed agents of a foreign corporation were trying to kidnap him. He had a small group of his sovereign citizen buddies with him, all holding signs and chanting. The deputies were hesitant. They didn't want a confrontation that could escalate, especially with it being broadcast online. They told me that for officer safety, they couldn't force the issue right then and there. They left, and I was left standing there fuming as Captain Delusion and his followers cheered. That was the moment I realized the system wasn't built for this kind of insanity. If I wanted my land back, I'd have to get creative. That night, I couldn't sleep. My lawyers said our only option was to keep scheduling the sheriff and hope one day they'd actually remove him, which could take months, even years. I was paying legal fees, property taxes, and my own mortgage, all while this lunatic was living for free on my land, destroying it day by day. I felt completely powerless. But as I sat there staring at the property survey, an idea sparked. It was a crazy, expensive, and frankly, ridiculous idea. But the more I thought about it, the more I smiled. It was perfect. My property didn't have direct road access. To get to it, you had to use a 500-foot-long dirt driveway that cut through an adjacent undeveloped plot of land. That driveway was a legal easement, but the land it was on belonged to someone else. I spent the next week tracking down the owner, an elderly woman who lived 2 states away and had forgotten she even owned the parcel. I called her up, explained my situation, and made her an offer. I didn't just want to buy the easement. I wanted to buy the entire 10-acre plot of land that the driveway was on. She was more than happy to sell. The price was steep, but my desire for revenge was steeper. The sale closed in less than a month. I was now the proud owner of my lake property, and the entire chunk of land surrounding it, including the only road in or out. The day the deed was officially recorded in my name, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Phase 1 of my plan was complete. Now, for Phase 2. I hired a local fencing company and a crew with an excavator. I told them my plan. They looked at me like I was crazy, but a job's a job. The next morning, we arrived at dawn. Captain Delusion was still asleep in his illegal shack. My crew got to work immediately. The excavator started by digging a deep 10-foot-wide trench right where the driveway met the main road. Then, the fencing crew began installing a permanent 8-foot-tall chain-link fence around the entire 10-acre perimeter. We left no gaps. We weren't just blocking the driveway. We were completely enclosing the land he was on. By the time he woke up and came outside, his only path to the outside world was gone. He was, quite literally, fenced in. He came running towards us, screaming his usual nonsense about sovereign rights. I just stood on my side of the new fence, holding a freshly printed "No Trespassing" sign. "Good morning," I said cheerfully. "As the legal owner of this property, I've decided to secure its borders. You're welcome to leave any time, but your vehicle is staying. And since you're now trespassing on this piece of my land, I'll be calling the sheriff." His face went from red to purple. He screamed that he was being held captive, that this was illegal imprisonment. I just smiled and pulled out my phone. This time, when the sheriff arrived, the situation was completely different. He wasn't on my lake property. He was now standing on my other property, the one between the lake and the road. There was no shack, no established residence. He was just a guy, standing in a field, surrounded by a fence he couldn't get through. I showed the deputy the brand new deed. "This man is trespassing on my land," I said calmly. "I'd like him removed." The deputy looked at the fence, at the trench, then back at me. I saw a flicker of a smile on his face. He turned to Captain Delusion. "Sir, the owner of this property wants you to leave." The captain started his spiel, but the deputy cut him off. "I don't care about your flags or your manifestos. You are trespassing. You have 2 options. You can climb the fence, or I can arrest you. Your choice." Defeated, he chose to climb. It was the most pathetic, undignified scramble you've ever seen. His followers, who had shown up and were stuck outside the new perimeter, just watched in stunned silence. As he stumbled off down the road, defeated, I looked back at the illegal shack, now sitting isolated and empty by my lake. The feeling was better than I ever could have imagined. I had evicted him without ever setting foot on the property he claimed. I used his own twisted logic against him. He wanted to be a sovereign citizen, isolated from the rules of society. Fine. I gave him exactly what he wanted. The aftermath was almost as sweet as the revenge. I hired a crew to dismantle the illegal cabin and haul away every last scrap of wood and trash. We spent a week cleaning up the shoreline he had damaged, and I planted new trees where he had cut them down. The land was finally quiet again. As for Captain Delusion, I heard he tried to sue me in his common law court, sending me another invoice, this time for $1 billion. I framed it and hung it in my office. A few months later, the county condemned and demolished his car, which was still trapped on my property. My land is peaceful now, my private sanctuary restored. And every time I drive down my very own, very private road, I smile. Sometimes, the best way to deal with people who think they are above the law is to use the law in ways they never saw coming. Thanks for listening to my story. It was a wild ride, but the ending was worth every bit of the headache. If you enjoyed this, make sure to like and subscribe, because you won't believe what happened when the county tried to tax me for the new fence. You don't want to miss it.